To introduce our speaker for today is Dr. Angela Labrador. Angela is an anthropologist and managing partner of Coherent Associates, where she develops community-based heritage initiatives to responsibly grow local economies while safeguarding cultural resources. She specializes in building digital geospatial inventory systems and is a certified master teacher with Project Archaeology. She co-edited the Oxford Handbook of Public Heritage Theory and Practice, 2018, and completed her doctorate at UMass Amherst in 2013. She's worked across the Caribbean and is delighted to live in Vermont, where she first worked in CRM, Cultural Resource Management, in 1999. Angela now lives in Barrie and is a lecturer at the Cultural Heritage Management Program at Johns Hopkins University. Angela is currently the president of the VAS and also edits the VAS newsletter and the website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I am going to share my screen and we can get started. All right. Can everyone see that? I'm assuming yes. Yes, thank you, Randall. All right. Well, as many of you may know, in August 2019, the Vermont Archaeological Society was awarded an NEH Landmarks of American History and Culture grant. And I'm so excited to finally be able to share with you the results of all of the work that went into that grant. Now, this grant was to fund teacher training workshops during the summer of 2020. We then prepared to host 72 teachers on the shores of Lake Champlain, where they would learn firsthand the magic of using archaeology to deliver place-based education to their students. Entitled Freedom and Unity, The Struggle for Independence on the Vermont Frontier, the week-long workshops featured an immersive program of participatory learning activities related to the American Revolution at partnering historic sites in Vermont's Champlain Valley. And you can imagine how much fun, this would have been, spending 1 week of your summer vacation touring these amazing sites and getting these hands-on experiences with archaeology and history. Of course, we all know what happened next, COVID. After postponing the 2020 program, we made the difficult decision to transition to a virtual context for 2021. And then came the real challenge: how to teach place-based education fully online. It was a tall order, but our strategic and innovative use of technology helped us deliver a successful and highly reviewed workshop that was in many ways, I think, more usable for teachers than what we would have done in person. So tonight, I'll outline our team's approach and highlight some of the learning experiences that we developed in order to demonstrate that place-based education can be successfully delivered online, and that archaeologists have a lot to offer in this pursuit. And I hope that if I do one thing, it's to inspire you all to seek out these types of partnerships and these types of educational opportunities, those of you who are working in the field. Now, before I get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the amazing project team that I worked with, beginning with my co-director, Jason Barney. Jason is a high school teacher. He teaches at Missisquoi Valley Union High School up in Swanton. And he's also a historian who is absolutely obsessed with the history of Northern Vermont, and especially the military history of Northern Vermont. And he was really important as a collaborator because, it's one thing to be talking about archaeology or trying to teach archaeology. It's another thing to teach it to teachers. We're training trainers. So he really kept me grounded and kept us focused on who our target audience was, which are teachers, who then have to translate the lessons we were giving them into their own classroom environments. Had amazing faculty at our partnering historic sites. Elsa Gilbertson and Tracy Martin, both from the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation in the Historic Sites program there. They absolutely gave us amazing access to these sites during the lockdown so that we could create the kinds of experiences we needed to for our participants. Elizabeth Lee and Chris Savick at Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. Elizabeth is an environmental educator and really brought in that component to the workshop, which was excellent. And Chris, of course, is an underwater archaeologist extraordinaire and brought a lot of fun into the workshop with his perspective. And finally, Dan O'Neill of the Ethan Allen Homestead, absolutely terrific museum educator and historian and reenactor. And who knew that he was a Cecil B. DeMille with the filming. He was quite the videographer and really put together some amazing videos for the project. We also had 3 guest lecturers, Ennis Dooling, Susan Ouellette, and Willard Randall, who also spent their time with us and with our participants, imparting their knowledge. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not recognize VAS Treasurer Kathy Nolan. It is not easy to administer a federal grant or to work with the federal grants system sometimes. And she handled all of our bookkeeping, all of the tax work that had to be done, writing out checks galore. So thank you for everyone for all of their help there. All right. Now, in terms of the NEH Landmarks program, our project was really distinct. And it was distinct for its incorporation of archaeological inquiry as a complement to historiography. Its use of both terrestrial and underwater archaeological sites, and its linkage between the competing worldviews present in 18th century Vermont and the persisting tensions between rural and urban communities across America today. With our shift to an online context, we knew that we didn't want 40 hours of Zoom talks, but we still had to deliver the entire workshop, basically a semester-long graduate level course, within 1 week. So we adopted a blended model using the Canvas Learning Management System and Zoom. Each workshop day would begin with 4 hours of asynchronous activities on Canvas, followed by 4 hours of synchronous activities on Zoom. Now, 40 hours of learning all at once is really incredible, really jam-packed. And you can imagine that in person, it doesn't feel like that because you're getting onto the charter bus and you're traveling to different sites and you're seeing the lake and you're experiencing these sites. But we were cognizant that 40 hours, in wherever you're taking the class from, typically it was in people's homes, it's going to feel a lot. So we were very thankful that the NEH did continue to provide the stipend that they normally give to participants to offset travel costs. They still gave those stipends to participants taking the workshop. Each participant received $1,300, and that was really important because I think it really helped the participants to make sure that they had childcare if they needed it, they could get a quiet space if they needed to, and it was also a really good incentive to keep them motivated and engaged with the learning, even though, of course, we try to make our content as engaging as possible. We tried to avoid passive learning as much as possible. Early on, we challenged our faculty with the directive that no video should be longer than 10 minutes. We didn't want our participants to just be sitting back and consuming content. We needed them to be an active part of the learning process. Videos that we did create were instead complementary to activities that our participants completed individually and in small groups. Thus, we stayed true to our objective of delivering a model for hands-on, place-based education. But what exactly does that mean in theory and practice? Well, our vision of teaching about the American Revolution in Vermont from a place-based perspective wasn't to just add local history and stir. Rather, it was about using the local as an entry point to discuss global issues that were just as pertinent in the late 18th century as they are today. I'll focus on three major objectives of our place-based pedagogy and show you examples of how teaching the American Revolution using archaeology can and needs to go beyond the outmoded arrow of time historiography driven by a handful of heroes and villains who have traditionally been wealthy white men. All right, so our first objective was the lesson that the local is not culturally homogenous. Every community, both those in the past and in our present, is comprised of a range of perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences. And each local community erects boundaries between who is inside and outside of that community. When we asked our participants to describe a Revolutionary War patriot, a particular stereotype looms large in our collective memory. As educators, we must ask and help our students to ask, who has been left out of this history? Thus, we crafted 36 characters, some based on real historic individuals and others realistic composites. And those of you who are inclined to math, I recognize there are not 36 on the screen. I got lazy putting them up here, but we did create 36 different characters. And all of these characters represented the range of individuals who were either living in the New Hampshire grants during the Revolution or came here because of the war. Now, these characters included men, women, and children of varying socioeconomic backgrounds and racial and ethnic heritage, with different motivations and relationships to the Vermont landscape and the tensions at the time. About 2 months before the workshops, we prepared care packages for each of our participants. And inside, among all of the goodies, which included some beautiful books that all of the participants received, they each received one of these character cards. So in essence, we assigned each participant one of these unique characters and then asked them to adopt their character's point of view as we progressed throughout the week. Participants began each day with a journaling activity whose topic often asked them to write from their character's perspective. Thus, we were able to tack back and forth between the macro view of revolutionary Vermont history and the micro experience in place, which helped to provide nuance and fill in some gaps in the mythic history. As one participant remarked, it was very interesting to see a totally different viewpoint on the events leading up to the American Revolution in Vermont. I've always viewed the revolution as generally agreed upon actions approved by patriots. However, now I want to do more research into the events in my area leading up to major wars. And I should just point out here, our participants were from all over the country. What we were trying to do was not teach them how to use just Vermont's historic sites or Vermont's archaeology, but to really inspire them to look to their own local communities, their own local archaeological resources and historic sites, and create opportunities for their students to impart these lessons with those resources. So getting this feedback was really gratifying. Now, in addition to using our characters as touch points during the week, the incorporation of archaeological evidence and inquiry helped us to uncover stories that are often left out of the history books. We have very few written accounts of revolutionary camp life. And what we do have is often written from the perspective of those privileged enough to be literate, have the time and resources to chronicle their activities, and whose legacy was deemed worthy enough of preserving over the centuries. Archaeology, as you all know, allows us to ask questions about the everyday experiences during the Revolutionary War. And there's no better place to do that than Mount Independence, perhaps the best preserved revolutionary archaeological site in the nation. In a series of short, interactive video lectures hosted on Panopto, participants were trained in the steps of archaeological inquiry, learning how to frame research questions, sample a site, consider the ethics of excavation, and how to classify material culture. They were then assigned to one of 4 excavation teams, which each explored different research questions. Each team member was assigned a locus, and then they each excavated 3 test units within their locus. The virtual excavation utilized interactive 360-degree photos that were annotated and hosted on ThingLink. And it was based upon the real archaeological investigations conducted on site over the decades. Thus, participants were not only digging in the same places where archaeologists have dug, but they were uncovering the same exact artifacts found there. Each participant compiled their own artifact catalog and then conferred with their excavation team through a guided facilitation where they compared their finds, identified patterns in their data, and attempted to answer their research questions. Now, not only did the participants have a great deal of fun, but they also uncovered a vast range of material culture associated with the everyday experiences of the Mount's inhabitants. Furthermore, participants learned that archaeological inquiry, just like historical inquiry, is open to interpretation and often leads to more questions rather than definitive answers. I think we've all have had that experience before in the field. Now, our second major place-based educational objective was that personal welfare is interdependent with the welfare of everyone and everything. In other words, context and connections are key. We utilized our characters to approach this objective, along with a piece of free software, Night Lab's Story Maps platform. Now, story maps allow one to create a historic narrative across time and space. Each day, participants were asked to add a new location and chapter in their story map to chronicle their character's journey through Vermont before, during, and after the Revolution. By explicitly connecting their narrative to the landscape, participants had to consider how their characters' actions and experiences were impacted by Vermont's geography and the other people they would encounter in that landscape. As one participant remarked, the story map assignment really stood out for me, as it asked me to get in the head of a person at that time and place, and to really think about my character's specific view would have been. Asking to consider how he would have traveled made me imagine what the roads, rivers, and forest would have looked like. I think a deeper understanding of a time breaks down the flat image we have of that time. In this case, that the revolution was good for some and hard for others, or some of both for everyone, really. We also approached this objective by exploring questions relating to military strategy. Participants learned about 18th century naval intelligence, including how to read historic naval charts to evaluate the rebels' choice of Valcour Bay for taking their stand against the British on Lake Champlain. And they used drone footage, topographic maps, and artifact distribution maps to evaluate the Battle of Hubbardton. Now, what better place to teach proficiencies related to reading maps, identifying causal relationships, or even calculating geometric trajectories than at Hubbardton? Our participants tried their hand at all of these skills during our History Detectives activity, in which they became battlefield investigators charged with evaluating 4 witness testimonies, a covertly fun way to teach how to evaluate historical sources. Asking research questions such as what role certain landscape features played in the battle helped to reinforce the lesson that human history is dynamically entangled with environmental history. And stopping to study a single military action, such as the Battle of Valcour Bay or the Battle of Hubbardton, allows students to reconsider the criteria for winning a battle within the context of a broader war, and how war itself is not a zero-sum game. Thus, in addition to context and connections, we can add complexity. In fact, many of our lessons modeled how to teach histories that are left open, that may be ambiguous, that may be unsettling and unsettled. If we're to embrace a place-based American revolutionary history, we must admit that our grand narratives of unambiguous endings, of clear heroes and villains, are convenient stories that our society has repeated over time. But these stories are different from the actual lived experiences of people in the past. That is, there's a difference between historiography and historical reality. Our workshop explored this further with our treatment of 2 figures who loom large in Vermont revolutionary history, Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold. We complicated their stories. We considered their various motivations, and we invited participants to consider what constitutes heroism in the context of a revolution wherein someone's brave patriot is another person's treasonous rebel. All right, so our third pedagogical objective in our place-based approach is to teach that we have an ethical obligation to place. It's not enough to just teach about the past or how our local places are tied to that history. We must cultivate an ethos of stewardship toward these places and to attend to the associated ethical questions of whose history is protected and how. Our participants had opportunities to dive into this further with a series of ethical dilemmas. Oops. For instance, students role-played as competing stakeholder groups who had to prepare a speech for a select board meeting during which the future of Hubbardton Battlefield as a potential development site was being debated. Participants were divided, with some adopting the viewpoint of local farmers who see the development as a once-in-a-lifetime chance to revitalize their small town. Archaeologists wishing to preserve the site, military veterans keen on protecting the site as hallowed ground, and local tradespeople eager for the prospective business opportunities. Participants learned how to engage in civil dialogue and debate, skills that seem ever more consequential today. The lesson focused equally on speechifying and listening, with many participants getting quite emotional about their assigned point of view, a reminder of the power of role-playing. In our reflection period, participants identified the values that were central to their faction and how each faction's values were valid. Thus, they modeled how being a responsible citizen is about understanding all perspectives about an issue before making a decision. And interestingly enough, in both workshops, the debate led to constructive discussions around compromises and potential plans that could honor multiple factions' value systems. Furthermore, teaching history by starting from the local enables students to improve their sense of place and build pride in their own community. My co-director, Jason Barney, was very keen on this point. He kept bringing it up for us time and time again. He had long encountered high school students who didn't think that Vermont, let alone their town of Swanton, played any significant role in national history. Teaching the revolution with the local as our entry point provides for more resonant learning opportunities and re-enchants students' local environments. This is critical to developing both an ethos of stewardship and civic engagement, because you're not going to care for, you're not going to care for something that isn't of value to you. So our place-based approach to teaching Vermont revolutionary history produced 40 hours worth of diverse content, tools, and learning modules that drew upon real archaeological sites to offer an inquiry-based exploration of the 18th century. So for instance, participants became experimental archaeologists using a flint and steel set that we included in their care packages. They all tried their hand at starting a fire and chronicled their attempts. There were several reports of bloodied fingers. I'm sorry to say, but they were troopers and they all tried. You can see here one of our participants getting some success. And then of course I think his phone died right when he got the flames. We also had, our participants exploring 9,000 years of history at Chimney Point in tours that featured Elsa Gilbertson and a cameo by state archaeologist Jess Robinson. And then they worked together in small groups to analyze 3 mystery artifacts that had been discovered at Chimney Point using an inquiry approach, beginning with observations, moving to inferences and interpretations, and then posing additional questions, remaining curious. They donned their virtual wetsuits. And joined Chris Sabick for a dive and tried their hand at identifying which shipwreck they were exploring. They hiked along with Ennis Dooling, who took them on a whirlwind 5-mile tour of Mount Independence in 10 minutes. And that hike, which is a lot of fun, is up on our new YouTube channel, along with a lot of these videos that were produced by our project faculty and site partners. Now, for teachers, such lessons can help to meet proficiency-based standards across the curriculum. And for archaeologists, educational experiences, such as the virtual excavation of Mount Independence.
That's fine, I'll pick it up later.
Well, no, here, stand over, put the cat down.
Excuse me. So for archaeologists, educational experiences, such as the virtual excavation of Mount Independence, I think models a new way to bring historic excavation data and gray literature to life. Think of all of the collections and reports gathering dust on shelves, and imagine how new life could be breathed into them for place-based educational purposes. In the end, while COVID certainly challenged us, it also gave us the opportunity to not fall back on traditional historic site programming and pushed our project team to design an innovative and participatory online program of revolutionary history that fostered an ethical obligation toward place, foregrounded context and connections, and emphasized cultural diversity. At the urging of Vermont's American Revolution 250th Anniversary Commission, we're now working on trying to adapt these materials for wider audiences. And I hope that our experience can also inspire other educators and archaeologists to partner together and explore similar opportunities. And that was part of the message that I took to the Society for American Archaeologists when I presented there a couple of months ago. We need to create these partnerships and look for these opportunities to build these educational programs. Teachers are hungry for them and they're excited to use them in their classes. And in fact, just this past week, we got a report from one of our participants that she had brought her high school class to Ethan Allen Homestead, and they put together an amazing program, inquiry-based program on comparisons of foodways between Abenaki, colonial English and modern foodways. And she shared her students' final projects, and it was just so great to see. So there are opportunities. We hear a lot that, we all have to teach to the curriculum and there's not enough time, but that might not be the case. And I think that teachers are, really excited to take on this material. Now, I will reiterate my thanks to our project partners and to some of our service providers. But before we break for Q&A, I would like to announce that in our work toward adapting these materials for wider audiences, we have now shared a lot of the video content to our new YouTube channel. And I am very excited to announce that we will be opening up our virtual excavation of Mount Independence to everyone. So I am going to show you how you can get involved right now. So I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen and I will share my main browser window, I think. All right, so you should all now be seeing the VAS website. And you'll notice here under educational resources, there's a new link called the Virtual Excavation of Mount Independence. And if you click on it, you will find information on how you can get involved. Now, basically, what it is anyone can excavate the site virtually. Oh my God, do not show up at Mount Independence with a shovel. Bad idea, Elsa would kill me. But no, for the virtual excavation, anyone can access the excavation and can excavate as many test units as you can. But we're gonna be running the synchronous sessions periodically throughout the year so that you can have the same experience that our participants did, so that you'll actually get assigned to an excavation team and a locus. You'll excavate your artifacts, create your own artifact catalog, and then we'll all meet together on Zoom with our excavation teams to compare our finds and see if we can answer our research questions and compare notes, and then hear about what archaeologists have interpreted over the years about these finds. So again, you can find this on our website, and this will show you exactly how to get involved. You can register for a preferred synchronous date, and right now we're offering Thursday, July 7th in the evening Eastern time, as well as Saturday, September 3rd during late morning. So that will be a Vermont Archaeology Month event. And you'll notice here that there's some pre-excavation training. It's about 2 to 4 hours worth of activities, but you just do them on your own time, at your own pace, over the amount of time ahead of the Zoom meeting. And then you actually dive into the virtual excavation itself and then attend the synchronous session. And I also have links to further resources in case you want to dive into the history of the site and the archaeology of the site even more. So I really hope that you will join us on our virtual dig. I know that it's been really tough during COVID. We haven't been able to offer as many volunteer opportunities as we've wanted, but perhaps this virtual excavation will kind of tide us over until we can all be together again safely. So with that, I'd like to open it up for Q&A. I will stop sharing my screen here.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, so anybody, if they have questions, feel free to drop in the chat or use the kind of reaction button to kind of get my attention. I'll call on you. That way we don't get a traffic jam here. But Angela, yeah, I mean, thank you for that presentation. That was really great. I always love when we can bring archaeology into the classroom. So well done. As somebody who kind of does programming as well, one of the things that I am always curious about, and so my first question, did you have any kind of a post-program evaluation? How did you kind of measure the success of this program with the teachers?
Sure, yes. So the NEH does require their grant participants to run evaluations so that they can then also communicate the success of their own programs. So we had an evaluation and we ran the evaluation at the end of the workshops, and everyone entered, completed an evaluation, which is awesome. And we had both quantitative and qualitative fields in that evaluation. And our qualitative fields were on, a ordinal scale of 1 to 5, 5 being highest. And across all of our categories, it'd be, what was the quality of the workshop? How would you rate the workshop? I mean, we were always at 4.6 to 4.9 in all of our evaluations. So we were just, we were really blessed with just like amazing participants, amazing project faculty. I think some of them might be on the call right now. I did see Dan O'Neill. Yeah, we got amazing feedback, and some of those, hey Dan, some of those quotes that you saw on the screen during the presentation were actually from our participant evaluations.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just keeping an eye on chat. No other questions. No one's raising a hand. I'm curious with the pivot to virtual. A lot of times when these programs go to virtual, like it was supposed to be in person, and you said that they're across the nation, I'm wondering if going virtual kind of led to more accessibility, and if I'm not sure if there's like another plan for one of these larger programs or kind of these offshoots, but like, do you see that hybrid version kind of allowing you to reach more people? Is there kind of a benefit to that? Kind of what were the challenges? What were the benefits of that pivot? I'm curious about.
Sure, I can speak to that. And then Dan, if you want to add to anything, please feel free from your point of view. But I think that the pivot to virtual actually became more practical for our teachers. I think that it is difficult for teachers to be able to sometimes organize as many field trips as they would like, or to take as much time as they would like to visit sites. And certainly technology has entered classrooms. I mean, I walked into a classroom, the other month, and it was like, a spaceship almost. You've got smart boards, all the kids have, laptops. So technology is also in the classroom. So even if you are working with teachers who are able to take advantage of field trips and go to these sites, which of course is what we were advocating for, you need to provide educational programming so that the teacher can integrate that field trip into their curriculum, so that they can have activities leading up to that field trip and kind of the debriefing reflection activities when they come back. And having those activities be available through technology itself so that the teacher can utilize the technology in the classroom, I think just makes it it's ready to go, and the students can engage with it more. And I would also say that online learning does allow us to meet accessibility standards. I am a big proponent of the universal design for learning mode of teaching, where you offer multiple modes of representation, engagement, and action, so that you're able to meet your learners' multiple modes of learning. And I think that the online environment more and more allows us to do that, because we have become more conversant with different media and different tools to express ourselves online. So I think it was one of those, blessings in disguise that we had to do it this way.
Absolutely, thank you. Those are the questions that I had. It was a great presentation. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions for Angela? Oh, Yvonne.
Yeah, I know that things changed pretty quickly for you and you had to really adapt, but I'm curious as to what you kind of learned from the whole thing. Like, what would you do differently, and or what really turned out to be spectacularly great? I mean, obviously, being able to go online and everything turned out to be a real blessing, but what would you do differently as well?
My God, I would have budgeted a lot more time. Everything takes so much longer when you're also doing it online.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the takeaways that I had was how much could be done with simple technologies. I think that the field ends up getting very taken by these big whiz bang technologies, where it's like, we need a huge 3D virtual reconstruction of this, pyramid or archaeological site to really get people into it. And that's just not the case. And, something as simple as providing annotated photos of a test unit where you click on to discover artifacts it's technically, it's not that hard to create, and yet it was so effective as a learning tool. And so I think that the lesson for me was because I'm a tech geek, no doubt about it, but the lesson for me was, simplify and use those simpler, more intuitive tools in a more interactive and engaging way, and people respond to that. And so all of the tools we ended up using, ThingLink, Panopto, and StoryMap, NightLab StoryMap, not ArcMap, NightLab StoryMap, those were all free and open source tools. Because I also wanted to show that these tools don't have to be expensive, so that all of our teachers were then able to turn around and use these tools in their classroom. And I've heard back from several of our teachers that they're using NightLab story maps in their classroom, and that's great.
Does anybody have anything else to add here?
Dan and Ian.
Oh, I just wanted to say, Angela and Jason deserve a lot of credit, because I'll just say they pushed us incredibly hard, and in a good way, because I think a lot of us who were part of this project, kind of like, we did things that we never thought were possible. And what I think was really great was, I think for a lot of people, the tech is this magical thing, and it was so accessible to the point where I'm like, oh, this actually, it didn't take that long to pick up, and we were able to do a lot with very little and really deliver a rigorous program. And I think the fact that our leadership, and that is Angela and Jason, were like, they were really great about, pushing us to where we never thought we could go, was really great. I also want to say, I actually left the homestead, and I now work for the federal government. I just completed a 6-week online course. And I was making suggestions based on some of the lessons that we learned during this project, to the point where the academy director said, you might get an email. So I just want to say that a lot of what I learned from Angela and Jason, I may take to other spheres, and that's it.
That is awesome. I see one of our participants. Ian, did you want to share something?
Hey, yeah. I just wanted to say thank you again so much for teaching just the entire class, everything involved. From everything you talked about, the different programming, especially the story map, it was a great way of just mapping out all these concepts, which, just through reading, would sometimes be hard to, I guess, give to other people. But once you've got, the ability to create kind of your own perspective on it, like getting into the mindset of all these different people, I thought that was really helpful. I know for me personally, the course, it fostered a lot of growth in terms of what I wanted to teach as an educator, and getting more into archaeology and stuff. A couple months later, I found myself with Yvonne, like digging up a bunch of nails and finding a foundation at Arnold's Bay. So I probably wouldn't have found out about any of that stuff without the class, and I'm just really grateful for that. So rave review from a participant. You should totally do this.
Ian, I got a metal detector for Christmas.
All right. Woo!
That's great. Thank you so much, Ian. I should say Ian was one of our participants who took this for credit. So, every participant received 40 contact hours that they could use toward their relicensing. But then applicants or participants could also take this for credit through Castleton University. And Ian was one of our for credit students, and those students not only had to do all of this work, but they also had to do additional assignments and complete a final project at the end. And Ian produced a digital video tour of his area, his town in Vermont. And it was one of the most creative, well done tours. It was incredible. And I'd love, Ian, if maybe we could share that on our YouTube channel one day.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh,
for sure.
cool. That would be awesome. I will talk to you then about getting that
Alright.
up there.
Yeah, cool.
All right. So if there's no further questions, I'm going to check chat one more time. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Angela. I think a round of applause for everyone. Thank you so much. This is a great presentation. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was an amazing experience.